Each has got decades of experience in dealing with MNDOT. And some of these provisions have been rolled out in advance on several projects. Not all of them completely, but many of them, and you've had experience in that. But before we get to the special conditions, or excuse me, new supplemental provisions, what I'd want to talk about briefly is the DBE program that we started with. And Tim, I know that the AGC has started a new subcommittee to deal with these DBE issues and try to work with MNDOT to just get better results. And I think you've developed some initiatives, or at least discussion points you want to bring forth to MNDOT, and I want to put them up on the screen and have you briefly go through them.
Thanks, Dean.
Yeah.
As you said, and I think you did a great job in the beginning of this today, going through all of the complexities and the things with the DBE program and the spec book as well. And the thing that comes to my mind, and I think I said it at my table, is who wants to be a contractor? So we are at AGC trying to get our arms around this thing, and I've been spending significant time the last several years trying to become learned on this stuff. And as Dean said, we're trying to work with MNDOT here in developing some approaches that we may offer them that as they're transitioning now through some of the turmoil that's going on within their staffing in the Civil Rights Office and retooling, can they think about these programs in their administration differently? And in fact, I was invited over by Commissioner Zelli to have a conversation with him at his invitation to talk about some of these things, which I thought was a good introduction. But we are, if you are interested in this and you'd like to offer some thoughts, I leave it open invitation. We'll probably be getting together early on this fall and trying to put our thoughts down. So that said, a couple of things. One of the big things is just sort of a change in approach as to looking at this program and looking at it from a race gender conscious program to a race gender neutral program, which is allowable under the regulation. And it's kind of shocking to see that other states achieve their compliance purely through race gender neutral means, meaning they don't set goals on projects and they achieve them through participation just generally in the marketplace from women and minority-owned businesses that are successful in a market competitive type of environment. And there are some court cases nationally that have been cultivated that can provide some light on it. I'm not as learned, Dean. Maybe you want to just spend a few minutes just reviewing, though I know the Croson case and some others that help.
Well, the old Croson case, which was, what was it, back in the 90s, that required that you do affirmative action, and but the program had to be narrowly tailored. The recent Fisher case from the United States Supreme Court now says that requires that a state engage in race-neutral activity, and only after it finds that its race-neutral activity is inadequate to achieve the goals will then it allow affirmative action. And that's circling back to your point, Tim, that a lot of states have found with adequate race-neutral activity, you can actually achieve the goals and you don't need the affirmative action and all these rules and headaches that it causes.
And that's exactly the point. And as you see, as we run through the slide, there's just a couple of things here that we're thinking about with respect to that, breaking contracts into smaller sections, enforcement or enforcing anti-discrimination laws, as simple as if there is an issue of awareness of discrimination on a project, that's what the Human Rights Department is for. Someone should file a discrimination complaint with the Minnesota Office Department of Human Rights, those types of things. Dean covered earlier, but the issue dealing with exclusivity agreements, let's take a look at that. MNDOT apparently does not have a preclusion against those types of agreements. However, other public owners in this market, the MAC, for certain, has that preclusion. You can't have those exclusivity agreements. the issue, it just came up, I think Tom Sloan brought it up, about what is a reasonable level of pricing and by virtue of the regulation, and trying to get some more certainty around how much over market rate is reasonable when your proposal is judged on the backside, and talking about that. If I can jump, because it's tied to that, if you look at number 5 up there, maybe there's a possibility of talking about developing some sort of pilot or a test program where you could provide a DBE preference, a bid preference or a quote preference, and that would allow the market to play out and to see maybe within this marketplace, where does that line fall? Is it 4%? Is it 6%? Is it 9%? Something like that may be a possibility. There was a lot of discussion today as well, but we're talking about looking at increasing the certification due diligence, looking at commercially useful function, pressing MNDOT to be more responsive in policing their own requirements for certifying DBEs. And I think you all saw in Dean's example of the audit that showed that MNDOT, as other states nationally are doing, spend an inordinate amount of time certifying their DBEs and getting DBEs into the program, but not enough attention, not enough resources, not enough time making sure that those certified DBEs are then ready, willing, and able, prepared, and quoting you all as prime contractors for work. A DBE loan program, we do have one now that's been re-engaged. It's a working capital loan fund. It is not a significant amount of money, but maybe we should look at increasing that, capitalizing that more, providing more opportunity for DBEs that struggle with cash flow, that struggle with capital equipment purchases, to be able to access that revenue and grow their business and become more successful. Number 7, a statistical study in the market to justify goals. Everything in these programs comes back to accurate, defensible, transparent goals. And if those goals are not set appropriately, there is strife and conflict from the beginning. Just a brief departure at AGC, our board commissioned us to spend some resources this spring to commission a national independent expert to take a look at how these goals have been set in this marketplace and to provide some objective analysis, and we did that. If you go on our website, we have 2 reports that are posted. We engaged a gentleman out of Baltimore named John Sullivan, who is recognized as a national expert on how these goals are set and what is an appropriate and defensible methodology for setting these goals. And John worked with us and helped us craft 2 papers, one on workforce goals and another on DBE business participation goals. I think you'll find those reports to be pretty enlightening. They present some challenges back to what is just sort of readily accepted in the marketplace, that the goal is at the right number. And our contention is that those goals need to be looked at and scrutinized more closely. So, and the last thing would be to look at the post-bid negotiation process that's allowed for and mandated through the regulation. I think this becomes more apparent and more of an issue in the design-build marketplace, which MNDOT and other owners are transitioning into, that they set a project goal on a design-build project, and you submit your proposal, and if you don't meet the goal, well, let me back up. You're supposed to basically reach out into the black box of the future on a project that's really only at a 30% design and determine how much work and the scopes of work that are out there that you can provide for opportunity for DBEs to meet that goal. And that's really an exercise in predicting and who can be accurate in that, and can we look at those processes and provide some more certainty and rigidity. I would ask a question, Dean, and maybe you can answer it, and I don't want to take any more time, but the question is, in the new contract special provision that we're all living under, that's now 2 years old from MNDOT on this program, you're given 5 days to get your justification and all your paperwork in order on your DBE submittal. But MnDOT will claim adamantly that you are not allowed to supplement your DBE. And I think there's some confusion amongst folks as, okay, I'm red low and I didn't meet the goal. Can I add DBE? Can I go out and solicit folks that didn't quote me and add them to my number and raise my attainment towards the goal? And I think there's some confusion. I don't know if you can help clarify that. So that concludes what I wanted to say. So.
Yeah. Well, there is confusion, and I know you can't add to it. What you stated at the time of your bid, MnDOT will claim that you're supposed to adhere to. On the other hand, I have had some success in reconsideration hearings saying, well, I did have the bid prior to bid, didn't put it on my form, but because of the negotiations that the regulations mandate, I now have obtained that additional DBE participation, which I originally had, just didn't use. So now, whether that's going to be allowed as the standard of practice, I just don't know because, as you say, Tim, it's unclear. We'd all be better served by working with MnDOT to clear all this up. So I'll make another pitch that both Tim and I are the heads of that subcommittee dealing with this. So if this affects you and interests you, please let us know. You can be on the subcommittee too. And we can all talk with MnDOT and see if we can't straighten this out a little bit better. Now, Andy, with that being said, I know CSM has had a lot of experience in this area and learned at least one lesson the hard way, that you really have to investigate CUF. What is it that CSM does to do that now, and has that had a negative impact on your ability to bid competitively and achieve goals?
Well, I think through the course of several past projects, we've experienced this in different realms. Going back several years, there's a project that we had that we actually experienced some DBE issues post completion of the project that resulted in penalties. Following that project, we had a subsequent project where we experienced similar DBE issues related to CUF during the course of the project that resulted in a requirement for us to fulfill the same percentage obligation that we had stipulated by finding others to overcome the ones that they were rejecting. And most recently, a project where we were actually declared non-responsive due to the fact that we did not meet the DBE requirement goal and others did. And it was primarily because we had done some investigation regarding CUF and had chosen not to use some certain companies because we felt it was going to put us in a position where we had been in the past, either in a position of being fined as the federal government moves in to oversee what MnDOT stipulates, or perhaps being in a position where during the contract you're going to have to remove one and find another. So as a result of that, our office has done several things. We have taken various managers and sent them out to different firms and requested to sit down with those firms and interview them, talk to them, and come with documents that walk us through what a CUF is and ask them very specific questions, ask to see their place of business. Do they have the things that require it? And try to make our own determination, because that's what we're being told by the federal government we're obligated to do. Whether MnDOT certifies them or not doesn't seem to be important anymore. It's whether or not your firm agrees with that and believes you're going to be in a safe position by utilizing those firms in your estimating and your bidding. We've put feelers out to hire people to come in to be just specialized personnel with helping us with DBE participation and CUF analysis. And I think that one of your slides earlier suggested that, and I think there are likely other firms out there doing the same thing. But a question that arises out of this whole thing is, how do you compete in this business anymore with, I have to find it, can I go in without it? Did I do a good faith effort? Did I perform enough investigation on my own accord to overstep what MnDOT may have already certified, and what MAC may say is one thing but MnDOT says something else? I mean, you're in this world of having to almost hire Dean or others to come to your office and determine whether or not your bid is appropriate when you send it in.
Well, it's working perfectly then, isn't it?
It is. For you, it definitely is, yes. Yes. So to compete in this world of bidding, when some do and some don't, the ones that aren't doing it, eventually it's going to catch up, like it has to us in the past. There's going to be an instance where during the contract or post-contract, you're going to get something coming down the road that's either a penalty or replacement, also may come with a penalty, but it throws you into a pretty good loop when you're in the middle of it.
When you do these field investigations, do you wear the flat iron hat and go out and investigate them?
I don't have that hat.
No, you don't, okay. You had a question, yeah.
I'm Mike Plumley. I've been doing this DBE business for about 12 years. I was a former specialist with MNDOT. I've been worked on both the construction side and also the personnel side of it. And I just would like to say to everyone here that the secret to gaining participation and satisfying the requirements that MNDOT is putting out there, even though there is inconsistent as all get out, the secret to this whole thing is in Appendix A. In Appendix A, the regulation says, if not, if you can't get participation here, then try this. If not that, then this. Gotta go right on down the line. Really get out there, really try to get participation. The people that are doing this reconsideration hearings, they're not construction specialists. These guys are just taking the regulation and they're applying it to their good faith efforts. They're making a determination from it. So familiarize yourself with the stuff that's in Appendix A. It's very important because that's the thing that they gauge your good faith efforts on. Recently had a meeting, or not recently, a couple months back, I met with Ralph Turner of the FWHT, and he says that 50% good faith efforts, he didn't say it was 50%, he said it was 80%. And I know that they are hammering MNDOT now to turn that around to make it 20% good faith efforts, contracts put out of good faith efforts, 20% and 80% on participation. So count on more of this stuff coming from you. It's going to be tougher, and they're just going to keep on doing it until people start meeting goals. And I know that this is their approach. So I just would like to urge everyone, look at Appendix A and try everything in there to do, because this is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse.
Those are great comments. Thanks. I'm going to go ahead.
I have a quick question. Can MNDOT legally penalize you if you, let's say they certify a DBE to perform a certain function, and then during the course of the project, they change the certification of that particular DBE subcontractor, that they're no longer certified to do that type of work that you had them contracted to do? You now have a subcontract with a company, but they're not certified as a DBE to perform it.
Right. In
So
fact,
can they penalize you for that?
if you've been claiming participation for them, they could say you should have figured out that they didn't have cough, and they could penalize you for that. But as I said, what you should do then is not count that subcontractor for DBE participation anymore, and instead you should go out and get and try to find, with good faith efforts, a new subcontractor, just like Manny said he had to do on one of his jobs. So that might cost you more money.
Well, I'm not sure that that's possible.
Well, if it's not possible, then you've got to document that you've done your good faith efforts to try very hard to do it. And if you can't do it, great. If you can do it, following Appendix A, and then you're required to do it.
A follow-up to that, Dean, would be, to further elaborate on that question, is in our instance where that did occur, we were able to recover and find others to pick up the pieces in other places. But there was a threat looming there from MNDOT that if you did not, there would be forthcoming penalties. So I don't know legally how that stands, but they did use that as a tactic to get that to occur.
Yeah, they will make the threat, and if you don't exercise good faith efforts, you could pay the penalty. That's why documenting your good faith efforts.
But
And I agree with the comment. Exhibit A is the menu by which you have to choose your efforts. And I went through many of them on the slides. But if you don't document that, then you don't have the evidence that you actually did it. So,
Could I make one more comment, sir?
sure.
One other thing that I noticed is about the good faith efforts process is that I wouldn't rely on your subcontractors to go out and get DBE participation. You gotta grasp control of that participation. You gotta get it for yourself. Because there's really no incentive for subcontractors to go out there and get DBE participation. If they make a good faith effort and they come back and they just say, you know what, we really couldn't find any DBE participation. There's no incentive. In fact, it's not incentive at all. If they get DBE participation, that's going to mean that they're going to get less of the project themselves. So I say, grab control of that good faith effort. Do it yourself. Get the participation up front, and adhere to the requirements of the good appendix A.
Now I'm going to switch gears to the standard specifications and ask Butch, because I know some of these new scheduling specs have been rolled out on certain jobs, and you've had some experience with them. And just like to ask you, how are they working? Do they help you manage jobs? And if you don't have a claim on a project, are the cost of these scheduling requirements worth whatever benefit you're seeing from them?
Yeah, Dean, Ames has been through 6 or 7 jobs now, either completed or in the middle of them with this hybrid CPM spec. And it started out where we hired a consultant to help us to run the program and get good at it and run the claim diggers and stuff like that. And it worked for a while, and it seemed like it's real quick it ended up that it was a posturing game, and it became really a whole bunch of paper that you couldn't really build a job off of, us or the DOT.
Mm-hmm.
And so an example of, we continued that with a consultant. We had a $20 million job in Savage, and MnDOT hired a consultant, of course, because none of them know how to read it or do it, and they take it for face value, and we would get things back. It took us 8 months to get a baseline schedule approved on a 1.5-year job, and it ended up, it was a lot of preferences. The consultant would come back, it was an 86-page reply at one point of stuff they didn't like about our schedule, and 12 of the things we were non-compliant with the spec. 12 issues on 86 pages. It was all preference. And they started putting our check in the drawer. So we agreed to do it. The consultant wanted, and I conditioned it that we're only doing it to make them happy so we get paid. So then they started paying us, and they exercised their allowable deduct that's non-refundable, and they took $65,000 away from us. Ames spent probably $80,000 in consulting fees. MnDOT spent way more than that with their consultant. And at the end of the day, that and 25 cents, and you can't go to Starbucks. So that's the what I see. So currently we're on another job. It's a state aid job. It's getting out of control. And we met with the county, and because the county's paying the consultant, I think we have a shot at getting this back to what the real world or what common sense prevails. So so what I've since done with that, Ames has done this fall, we hired a scheduling expert engineer that came from another big, large contractor to get in our staff. And that's been a good thing. It's helped, but it isn't the answer either. A lot of this is preference driven from a consultant, and MnDOT doesn't know what they're doing or want to weigh in on it. And then when they decide to exercise these non-refundable deducts or throw your check in the drawer, that's the real tough part. And a lot of it is sequencing and logic, and you try to tell them, well, we're the contractor, we know what we're building, this consultant sitting in Florida doesn't, and it just is real frustrating that way.
You raise a good point that it's not just MnDOT. These are state aid projects with other counties, and then
Yes.
cities often incorporate the MnDOT
They
standard
require them
specs.
to.
Yeah. And so, if MnDOT has a difficult time enough, are we imposing this on counties and cities that really can't have the expertise to properly administer it, and forcing them to go out and hire all these people because we're constraining it to them? But I take it you've had a very positive experience with this, and thanks for that field update.
Costly.
All right. Dennis, you've had some experience with MnDOT recently on on claims of concurrent delay. Give us an update on that.
I guess as Butch said, and everybody here has probably had the same experience as Lunda and Ames has had on schedule approval. Most of us are 4 or 5 months into the project with 4 or 5 updates to the baseline schedule before it's approved. And MNDOT, and then all of a sudden you've got a weather event or some claim, and or you encounter contaminated materials, whatever it might be. It's a definite MNDOT delay. Well, what their scheduling consultant will do, and as Butch said, they don't understand their own scheduling spec, nor do they have the expertise themselves to understand your schedule. But these scheduling experts that don't know how to build projects in Minnesota that are from Florida will analyze your schedule, they'll run it through their system, and they'll find a concurrent delay. And that's in their new specifications, that if you have a concurrent delay that is attributable to the contractor, that's an excusable delay on MNDOT to offset the delays that are MNDOT's responsibilities. And what it ends up is in a long, drawn-out negotiations that may or may not involve Dean's firm. It's a good deal for the attorneys, is what it is.
I didn't draft these, Dennis.
No, you would almost think you did.
Yeah.
I mean, they even go to the point that if they don't like your schedule, even with the state shutdown, several contractors were impacted, material fabricators were impacted. MNDOT has gone so far as to threaten to terminate contracts if you didn't give them a schedule that they liked. And as Butch said, it's all preference driven. It's not contractual. It's what they want to see, and it's preference driven.
Now, you're all large, successful contractors, and you're bringing on scheduling expertise within your firm. I mean, do you think that a MNDOT highway contractor can comply with these specs by themselves without having in-house scheduling expertise?
Not without hiring a consultant or some help, probably, Dean.
No, they don't even know how to run the program themselves without.
It's too dangerous.
And their consultant just runs it through a claim digger program. It's whatever the computer spits out. There's no common sense to it at all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, schedules are meant to be resequenced, resources added, etc. That's totally gone in that equation.
Right. I'd just like to find out from the crowd who has experience or would say that they are experienced in the AACE schedule protocol. Raise your hand. Yeah, the claims consultants do.
I am now.
Yeah, you are now. Right. Well, this is the new protocol that we all have to use. So, Mark, I know there's been some revisions to other spec sections beyond Division 1. So how has MNDOT been to deal with, say, on the concrete specs? Have they been collaborative? Have you been listened to? Have they even asked you for your input?
Yeah, again, just to give you a quick background on myself. I'm probably a new face to most of you. My name is Matt Zeller. I'm with the Concrete Paving Association of Minnesota. But I worked at MNDOT from 1991 through 2001, and I've been with the Paving Association for the last 12 years now. And back in the mid-90s, 94, 95, we transformed our concrete paving specs from more of a method spec to kind of a quasi-performance spec, which was a big change. But we didn't do that just as MNDOT, here's what we're going to say to do. Here's what you're going to do. We did several pilot programs. We did lots of walking before we ran. We worked with the contractors, brought up these ideas. How do you think they'll work? We tried them. And I think it worked real well. So that was, like I said, back in the mid-90s. So 15, 16 years later, most of our specifications are still based off of the special provisions. When we go to a paving job, you've got we had the blue book and the green book and the brown book and all the different books, but none of the paving specifications really ever, the concrete paving specifications applied. They were always in the special provisions. And as we went through the years, as things evolved, we found things that didn't work so well, things that worked well. MNDOT and the concrete office, especially the office, was very accommodating. When I was in there, I spent a lot of time out in the field working with the contractors, trying to understand what they did. So as we developed these specifications, as a MNDOT person, as a spec writer, I knew what it took for them to do the job. After I left, it works well now that one of the folks that was under my supervision is now the concrete office, the concrete engineer. She understands as well what we're going through here, and they've been very accommodating over the years of this is what it takes to build these roads. We understand what you're asking for. It does seem though like every year though a new toy comes out and they specify it and someone takes it to the nth degree, and the next year we have to rein it back in. But at least it's been comforting to know that they are willing to listen and understand when they're asking for something that really doesn't have a lot of merit to it. Again, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it seems like they're trying to solve problems that are non-existent. We run into that, but like I said, more often than not, they're willing to listen to us to rein things in when they're not necessary.
Thanks. Well, Matt, that segues to my last question to both you and Tim before the bar opens. So it'll be a short answer, I know. You both come from a MNDOT background. Do you think there is an opportunity to continue to engage in a dialogue with MNDOT to solve some of the issues that we've been talking about today? And if that's true, how should we go about it as an industry?
I'll start first since I got the mic on, then I'll hand it to you. Again, the way we did this, we worked with our specialty offices for the concrete side. I think if you continue to move forward with this, you've got to work in smaller groups. We're going through something similar to this in the pavement selection world, but all of a sudden this document showed up, and this is going to be our new Bible of how we develop our pavement jobs. They didn't talk to anybody. They just developed it in a vacuum. It seems a lot like how the special provisions were developed, or the spec book. I think they've got to work with the industry. They've got to work with their own specialty offices within the groups and make sure they have people there that understand what they're asking for. The only way you can get that back is to have people within MNDOT that understand what the contractors are going through. And if they don't, you're in trouble from the get-go.
Yeah.
We're in trouble from the get-go.
Let me add a little bit to that and finish up here. I think candidly, the relationship is broken. It just is. I've been on both sides of the equation, and I've never seen things at Swords Point as much as I've seen it here in the last 2 years, maybe more. And it doesn't seem to improve. And so what does all of that mean? And if you think of it on an interpersonal relationship, we're headed towards a divorce, and we need to go to counseling or something to help this relationship between the owner and the contractors survive and prosper. And to that end, we've been working at AGC and with you all as well as contractors. Some of you may be aware that MNDOT has put together a partnering group that's been trying to work on, let's break this down into some basic components, and let's figure out how do we start assembling it back together and work on the relationship. And the way that you do that is to build back familiarity and to build back perspective from each other's side. And to that end, some ideas have been put forward. One of those that I threw out on the table that hasn't been tried and tested yet, but is an idea that we're going to test drive here in a couple of weeks. At AGC, we have a quarterly membership meeting 3 times a year, not including our annual meeting, but in the fall, and then in the spring, and then in the summer. And they rotate around the state. And the fall meeting is in Rochester this year on the 19th of September. So the idea of mine was let's I'd almost like to ask in the room, how many people know or have a relationship with the district engineer in Rochester or in Mankato? I mean, I, for one, there's so many new folks at MNDOT, I don't even know who's sitting in what chair there now. So the idea was, let's just have a dialogue. Let's get together and let's share information from each other's side and start from that perspective. So hopefully what we're going to try to do on the 19th in front of our quarterly membership meeting in Rochester is we're going to have a regional dialogue roundtable is kind of what I'm calling it, and ask for contractors to be participating in that, and MNDOT to bring their management teams from the districts and from central office to just start to get to know each other again and talk about what's going on, share information. Because what happens when you don't understand the other perspective is you immediately jump into the vacuum and start grasping at decisions and determinations of how things were done, why they're done. And I think, and the challenge for us as contractors is we have to be able to, and I think if you totaled the sum total of this meeting up, it would almost be like a let's all gang up on MNDOT meeting. And believe me, I'm not defending them, but the challenge is to step out of your own perspective and sit in the other person's perspective or other person's shoes and try to figure it out from what their motivations are. And hopefully we'll start to be able to do some of that and build the relationship back. But it starts at a basic level. It starts from just understanding and knowing people on an interpersonal level. And I think we've all gotten away from that. It's very easy to send a pointed email or to leave a scathing voicemail, but it's very different when you sit down and you share a cup of coffee with somebody and you understand it. So if you're interested in that, I'm trying to focus these meetings around a geographic representation, and the meeting on the 19th really is about the southern part of the state. But if you do business there, you're all welcome to attend and be part of that. So it's all on it goes out in our weekly update. It's on our website as well. So that's one avenue.
Great.